Training is strategic, and it impacts your bottom line. Businesses need to train their customers to build loyalty, sales and partners teams to accelerate growth, and workforce to drive innovation. What if you could use a single platform to build learning experiences for customers, partners, and employees alike? Introducing Adobe Learning Manager, a perfect enterprise-ready platform that is built to scale. Make learning an experience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Strategic Sales Enablement, sponsored by Adobe, ELB Learning, Corporate Visions, and SGA. I'm Avery Vogt, Events Coordinator at Training Industry, and I'm so happy you could join us. Before we get started, I'd like to just quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat for comments and submit questions in the Q&A panel. All questions will be addressed during the event or at the end of a program during our Q&A section. We would also love to hear what you have to say about today's session on social media, so please follow @TrainingIndustry as you share your favorite takeaways. At the end of your time with us, you'll notice a short evaluation survey has popped open in another browser. We'd appreciate your thoughts on today's event. And all of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us with a link to the on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd love to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. Make Training Industry your go-to resource for learning solutions. Visit trainingindustry.com to learn more. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Alan Partridge. Dr. Alan is the Director of Evangelism at Adobe and has over 20 years experience in e-learning, education, games, and multimedia development. He has researched and reported on authentic learning solutions for audiences around the world for the past decade. Alan is recognized for his many online video tutorials and e-seminars, which are a mainstay for e-learning developers and trainers looking to create and deploy effective learning materials. Alan, we are very excited to have you here today, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so very much, Avery, and thanks to all of you for joining today's session. It's absolutely great, as always, to have a chance to spend these times with you. So I'm glad that we're able to get together. As I always say when we start one of these sessions, the wealth of knowledge in this room comes from all of the people in this room. So I hope that you will take advantage of the active chat pod today and go ahead and carry on conversations and just try to keep them confined to the topic of the day. That'll help so that everyone gets the most they can out of today's session. You might be thinking about some of the research or other things that I share today, and you may have thoughts of your own. Your insights are incredibly valuable, so I hope that you'll feel free to contribute those insights in the chat. And if you have some additional questions, save those up for the end, and we'll knock them out at the end of the session today. Awesome. So let's forge ahead then. Today I'm going to be talking about the way that sales, and specifically sales enablement in the area of B2B, is evolving, changing, growing. And I'm going to start with some research from McKinsey, but I'll also give you some research from Gartner and others as we go along. The deck you will find is probably quite useful. It's available as a PDF after this session. You simply grab it from Training Industry, and then you'll find that these things, the links at the bottom, always contain direct links to the research reports that I'm referencing. So that should help you to kind of back things up if your hope is to build a case or to begin to form an argument based on the ideas that I'm presenting today. So let's start with B2B sales and that evolution in B2B sales. There are 5 key tactics identified in the recent McKinsey report that are being employed by the most successful B2B players in order to sharpen their sales capabilities today. Those are omni-channel, making sure that They're able to cover all of the different modalities or channels of delivery for sales messaging. Advanced sales technology, an ever-growing range of products, technology solutions, et cetera, are constantly coming to the forefront. And those are absolutely something that the most successful organizations are using and adopting. Data analytics, making use of data, not just in the passive sense of going into the data and mining it, but actually using actionable data, pulling out understanding based on the data itself, and based on using it interactively, letting the data make recommendations, using the analytics to help you form discoveries and make choices going forward. Tailored strategies for third-party marketplaces. So think about these as when you have additional marketplaces or spaces wherein you're specifically able to bring your messaging, the strategies can become more and more customized. And then finally, excellence in e-commerce overall. So ensuring that the approach to e-commerce is absolutely everything that it can be is fundamental and essential. When we look at that omni-channel question specifically, one of the things that you're going to notice is that in the omni-channel space, it's becoming more and more sophisticated. If we look at 2016, for example, going back just under a decade, you'll notice that the channels available were pretty basic, right? We had emails, we had in-person, some phone, maybe you had a supplier website, a procurement portal, pretty basic, straightforward kind of channels to worry about your marketing messaging and to worry about your direct contact with customers. By 2019, just a few years later, those channels have begun to explode, with 7.5 different channels on average being used by these most successful companies. Then by 2021, we're looking at an era where the number of channels used is exploding again and moving into even higher numbers, 10 plus channels available at that point. You can see that there are a number of additional things that are coming into play at that point, right? So mobile apps are coming into play, the ability to have video conferences, web chats, Google search, trade shows, and the list just keeps growing and growing and growing. So when we think about omnichannel, it becomes ever more important. We could be talking about anything from kiosks in a brick and mortar store to various mechanisms for delivering direct advertising campaigns, and they can become more and more inclusive. I know one of the things that we look at with our education and training itself is the ability to use the education and training experiences as their own kind of marketing solution. So all of these spaces become a really vital part of understanding what's available to the individuals who are in turn selling your products and services. Okay, so now the organizations that have the highest satisfaction numbers behave somewhat differently than the other organizations that are out there. And their productivity is a part of that outcome. In fact, according to the McKinsey report, they are 2.6 times more successful in terms of gross margins for every dollar that they're investing in sales. This is the top 25% of companies out there, and their outperformance of their competitors is really a substantial advantage. So it's worth taking a look at them and understanding why they're doing better. The three areas that those top quartile companies focus on are developing high-performing talent, freeing up seller time for customer-facing activities, and prioritizing the most valuable opportunities. I thought that was an interesting nod in that specific direction. Now, I have heard some commentary from folks in the sales avenue that one of the potential pitfalls here as well is developing high-performing talent at the cost of developing talent across the board. And so I think that while we see this coming from McKinsey, I don't think it necessarily excludes the notion that you would want to invest in your entire talent tree rather than invest in the most high performing folks. But obviously, if you're not developing your high performing talent at all, and instead having them spend a lot of their time on ventures which are not productive or successful, then that's going to lead to some significant problems. The need for the right talent is becoming a significant factor in terms of gross sales function. The reason organizations need to review sales include these three major insights, right? One, hybrid reps are now making up half or more of the sales force in the FSI industry, for example, in energy, and 45% in high tech and consumer sectors. Now, by hybrid reps, of course, we mean reps who are actually both operating as remote, over the phone or over web kind of reps, but also reps who are going to go out and actually make face-to-face contact with the personnel in the field. Inside sales, another major factor to be considered. High-powered analytics and digital enablers are revamping inside sales to expand reach and to increase the overall penetration. And then finally, it's a race for excellence in terms of making it to these top organizations for the B2B sales orgs, and raising that bar in terms of agility and talent is an important, a critical consideration. So when we think about effective sales enablement, we're actually thinking about it in terms of an overall successful journey from good to great. And we can think of it this way. If you're doing sales enablement well enough, then you're training on multiple skills. But if you're doing it great, you're actually going to train on specific learning journey skills. In other words, you're going to take a look at the sales personnel and what it is that you're trying to actually upskill them on and get them to do successfully, and build that into a comprehensive schema that gives them a plan or a map. And a lot of this has to do with what motivates learners to actually be successful in this approach. So I want you to think about it this way. We know that when learners are given a clear purpose, they are far more likely to actively participate, learn from, and retain the ideas that you're trying to promote for them. When they don't have clarity of purpose, then they're likely to pass that by, to skip that knowledge, not pay very much attention to it. You can think about this in terms of everyone who's in this situation, but probably few people more so than sales personnel, are all facing very, very busy schedules with tight options in terms of how they should spend their time. And making decisions about whether they're going to reach out to call that customer or whether they're going to study that latest technology or whatever it happens to be, are all facing direct competition with what you're doing in terms of your actual training. Now, when you simply give them kind of bits and pieces that they then have to assemble back together without a lot of clear communication about the purpose of those bits and pieces, they will not perform as well. They can perform, they have the acceptable materials, but they will not perform as well as organizations that are giving them specific learning journeys, specific guided tours with clear communication about the purpose, about why they're going to benefit. And when we say purpose, I really mean the way that they will benefit, the how. How will this benefit me? How will it benefit my team? How will it benefit my organization? That's what they're really looking for. We can also look at that good to great comparison in terms of support by sales leadership. Yes, it's good and essential that you have to have support by sales leadership, but are the outcomes actually owned by the sales leaders, or are the outcomes owned by the individual learners? We know that when the outcomes are owned by sales leaders, and they're the ones who are ultimately accountable for it, that those tend to be more successful initiatives. Driven by high quality off-the-shelf content, that's good. It's acceptable. You can acquire the content, the learning, the training, and so on, and you can bring it in. It's okay. But tailored content based on actual sales motions in your organization is extraordinarily better. Okay, so the ideal scenario is instead that you put together the sales motions, make decisions about how you want to approach those pieces. And even if there are off-the-shelf solutions to do training for that basic idea, it will be significantly more impactful. It will be great if you actually bring that forward as a detailed discovery based on the sales motions themselves. It's also important to consider what kind of scheduling you're working out. If it's a once a year thing, that's okay. If it's continuous effort, it will be substantially stronger. Why is that? Because knowledge retention is temporary and it wanes over time. We know that once you trained on that basic set of concepts, that's great. It's fine, right? It's there, it's on the table, but it's not really the best that it can be unless you revisit it. So you want to bring those personnel back to it over and over again. And that gives you a chance to update it, both from a messaging, marketing, and a sales initiatives kind of perspective. But it also gives you an opportunity to bring it back to the forefront in terms of the potential competition space for your products and services. You're not always going to be dealing with sales personnel in a B2B space where they're only representing you. They might be representing, in some cases, your competitors. And so having that kind of constant, continuous effort is going to be significantly more successful. It also is good to have it measured based on the completion, but it's great to have it measured based on the sales impact. So what I mean by that is that the most effective solution here is that you want to actually take a look at what were the trainings that were taken by reps, and then what were the actual sales initiative, the sales outcomes for those personnel. So ideally, in the ideal situation, you want to be able to map the overall trajectory toward target and completion of target against the specific skills and sales training initiatives that were there for you. Sometimes this can be a little bit troubling. If you have these sales personnel internally, that's one thing. You can kind of make that map quite easily, right? But you may have more difficulty discovering the specific sales performance of individual reps on the other team that's your B2B partner. But if you work with them, you may be able to find that you can at least get a sense of what is their percentile of motion toward target, that sort of thing, on the aggregate. How did the groups perform overall? And those can also give you huge insights in terms of whether or not that's impactful. So these stats, by the way, are coming from Brandon Hall, and you'll see the source there is at the bottom. All right. So what then are the primary challenges of sales training? Well, look at them across this little loop here in the circle. Lack of insight into external groups is the thing that customers talk to me about all the time. The inability to understand or have transparency about what training is being taken and what kind of performance outcomes there are related to those individual customers and their success. That's one of the nuts that we've been able to crack pretty effectively at Adobe, because we've found ways to actually get aggregate reporting back up to you from your partners. And one of the ways to do that is to develop a kind of portal style training solution, and then work with partners to understand the logistics of individual performance, or at least aggregate performance of groups. Once you understand who the members of that group are, and obviously you're getting the reporting because you've set up that kind of portal interface on the training that's been taken and by whom and that kind of thing. Cost structures are another significant problem or potential problem. The lack of the right technology is constantly a kind of moving target inside the sales training space. Content development, actually being able to put the content together in an expedited enough way that you can actually be meaningful in terms of your delivery, another ongoing challenge. And 63%, according to the Brandon Hall survey, said that difficulty measuring the effectiveness is the #1 challenge. So I think here my advice is that ultimately, whatever your technology stack is, whatever it looks like, try to make sure that that stack is incredibly extensible, because you should be able to make arrangements to centralize the data around key points that you need to understand. But ultimately, that's only meaningful if you can get the data or collect the data from all of the different elements of the technology stack. So you want your training technologies to be able to deliver data in a way that it can be centralized and then analyzed in a comparative sense against things like overall performance for those groups that you're training to. So the idea here, what good is this? Well, the good here is that learning platforms, when they are effective, can solve these challenges, right? Ultimately, an effective learning platform, something to deliver your sales training initiatives, can drive personalized learning for each individual sales rep. It can give you an opportunity to set up a series of recommendations for individual sales reps that will help them to understand why that's beneficial to them, that clarity and purpose. And then the other factors of motivation are that you want to make sure that you're providing a sense of autonomy, of individual freedom in terms of the selection of when and how to consume the learning and training content. That autonomy, we know, is another key factor that motivates learning. It motivates people because it doesn't make them crazy. And again, it goes to that same concept, which is that knowledge workers in today's economy, including folks like sales personnel, really need to have control of their own schedule, their own agenda, and they prefer to have control of the kinds of ways that they consume. So do they get it on video? Do they get it in text? Do they get it as PDF files? Do they get it? How do they get that training material? See, people have individual preferences, and we're not in a world anymore where people like the idea that you're sort of forcing them to take training just this one way. They would rather have the ability to take training in multiple kind of deliverable modalities. So all of those aspects are a part of autonomy. And then finally, mastery. Demonstration of mastery and recognition of your mastery of individual skills, in this case, sales related skills. So things like training for individual technologies or solutions that are being delivered. All of those pieces are pieces that can be mastered, and the demonstration of that mastery comes through taking exams or quick quizzes or watching videos and demonstrating your knowledge, that kind of thing. All of those things are about demonstrating mastery. When you put those three things together, purpose, autonomy, mastery, you get motivated people, and motivated people makes a difference. That mastery demonstration can be done through social learning and through gamification. So those aspects become important as well. Now, it's important then to recognize that each individual is their own entity so that we can get those accomplished goals, the autonomy and the mastery and so on. To do that, we can leverage AI with learning platforms. So you want your learning platform to use AI to automatically look at who is this person? What is it that they sell? What unit do they sit with? What is their geography and so on? And then to surface for them recommendations that are based on what are your colleagues and peers learning about? What kinds of products and services do you need to know about? What kinds of disciplinary related content do you need to be informed about as there's change and evolution inside of your landscape? All of those factors need to be considered and then used to live push content that makes the most sense for that individual. So you want to base that not just on the planned journey that you put together, but also things like peer recommendations. You also want to make it easy for sales leaders to really have a comprehensive overview of the progress of each individual representative. So ideally, we're finding that more and more of our customers are building portals that are specifically dedicated to their B2B partners. And when the B2B partner logs in, they're able to see an overview of their team, how their team is performing, what kind of training their team has consumed, and they're able to even map that against their internal revenue outcomes, et cetera, all inside of that customized portal. So everybody wins in this situation. You as the organization are driving the education and the creation of that content, delivering it out, ensuring that your messaging is on target for everything. But your partners are benefiting because they're getting a customized, again, personalized portal that allows everybody in the organization not just to consume the content, but to actually understand what the outcomes of that training were. It also becomes relevant to remove distractions with things like a unified player that allows you to ensure that there aren't any blockages to consumption of the training content. Then the number one reason people don't complete their training content is they ran into an obstacle. Oh, it was in a PDF file. I couldn't download it and open it. Oh, it was a video and video didn't work on my system and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's why Adobe's tech takes this paradigm and turns it around. It converts everything into HTML5. So it all plays in an HTML5 browser. You want to look for a learning platform that does something like that, that allows you to have a completely consumable content delivery solution that's sort of like a YouTube for learning that will allow your people to be able to consume everything. And you know that reliably they don't have to have any additional technology to make it happen. And then finally, you want to be able to integrate with performance management tools so that you can measure sales performance against learning. And that's, you know, what I've been talking about here for a minute. Watching the clock. Okay. So what about automation? When we think about automating the sales learning journey, we can think about it in several sectors. Obviously, you want to automate onboarding so that you bring your sales reps in, and that means having a technology stack that's going to support that kind of automation of the onboarding experience. You want to automate recommendations, making sure that you're leveraging AI and modern tech to be able to make real-time recommendations that matter to the learners. You want to automate course correction. In other words, you want to use the information about how their performance was in the courses and content they consumed in order to real time be able to turn and twist and remediate and assist that individual in performing better and better. It also means things like automated course correction in various on the job scenarios, right? So maybe the sales personnel are just not getting a certain sales play that you have designed for them. And you're seeing that sort of crash happen. Well, being able to have their manager initiate a new kind of training piece right there and then at the moment that's identified by the system can make a huge difference in terms of being able to correct before a person's gone too far down the line of misunderstanding or trying approaches that don't work. And then finally, you want to be able to have automated performance viewing. So you want to be able to have performance evaluation at every step. That means something like a portal that surfaces that information for not just the learner, but for the manager of that learner, even when the manager of that learner is not a part of your organization, but is a part of your partner's organization. So obviously, I'm leading up here to the notion that Adobe Learning Manager is a technology which supports these kinds of solutions and makes the architecture stack work really effectively. It's an interesting solution because it allows you to deliver a comprehensive solution which is live on demand. It lets you have training that builds global standards. Lets you personalize learning experiences and lets you measure how learning impacts sales performance. If you want to kind of understand how we address this kind of solution with Adobe's tech stack, you can think about it in terms of these 5 aspects. We think about experience, engagement, personalization, automation, and the core platform. Ultimately, we're talking about a unified learning experience, so one that doesn't require anybody to jump out. The big key there is that extensibility I talked about earlier, the ability to completely brand all of the learning content and integrate it with your existing web spaces, apps, and so on. There's no need to go back into kind of LMS dungeons here. You can surface courses and content right where your people actually are. And that's how come you can build things like custom portals for your customers to use. You can build things like custom apps and so on, all because it's using that HTML5 architecture. The engagement aspect is all about the inclusive and proactive learning through gamification, social hybrid learning, based on those motivating factors I talked about before. The personalization is dependent upon Adobe's custom AI solutions, and that includes everything from dashboards to actual interest campaigns, because Adobe system actually lets you mine how people behaved when they were learning, and then use that data to better understand what it is that they're trying to do. The automation element is all about smart workflows, automating those processes, making sure that course assignments and so on are all happening based on logical flow. And then finally, the core platform, because it's Adobe, it's enterprise-grade security. It allows for extended integrations and training monetization. So with that, I will jump back to the room and see if anybody has questions.
All right, thank you. Yeah, everybody, I just put that in the chat, but if you do have any questions for us, feel free to pop open your Q&A panel to put those in. All right, let's start off with one. How is the technology stack supporting your B2B sales team evolving?
Well, it's a good question. So, I mean, we've seen this evolution pretty much in real time, and it's been a pretty dramatic shift. So I would say, a decade ago, we at Adobe, we had a technology stack that was pretty straightforward, simple, rooted in traditional learning mechanisms. And people were frustrated, honestly, internally, because we've sort of grown into, think of it, for a long time, we had these sort of learning management technologies, and then we had marketing technologies. And you could see that, wait a minute, I'm working with customers, whether those are B2B customers, B2C customers, even if they're internal trainees, they're ultimately customers that I'm trying to get messages to. Most of the frustrations that people were having were, I can't get clear messaging out to people. I can't send a darn email campaign and see whether or not they saw it, see whether or not they responded, see whether or not they're coming, right? So all these things that we've accepted as common sense in marketing, we were still not seeing in the education and training side. So for Adobe, we went through a long, complete shift, and that parallels the growth of this technology. All of our internal technology runs on this now, and it's incredibly more powerful because now we're able to actually see what people are doing in real time as they're reacting to all of these kinds of messages, but also as they're training itself. And I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, that's something you just don't find elsewhere, that the training that people take triggers insights, which then delivered back into a cluster of information that helps you better understand that individual, helps you better understand their unit, helps you better understand that group and cluster and everything. And not just understand them, but take action. So you can take action based on those data triggers to actually, send out a campaign. So if you've got a B2B partner and suddenly you notice, oh, wait, everything that the B2B partners personnel are doing is all related to this one core technology, that gives you a huge clue as to where their actual focus is. And that can help you make decisions and raise awareness. Maybe you want to double down and see why a partner is not addressing other key interests that you thought they were, or maybe you want to triple down and say, oh, this partner is clearly exclusively focused on A, how can we better support them? All those insights are something that historically we weren't able to pull out, and now we definitely are. We do this actively at Adobe, and all of our customers are able to do this as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Can you talk more about what you see really changing in B2B sales?
Absolutely. So we hit on this at the beginning, right? But It's interesting. I mean, certainly the omni-channel is the kind of mainstay story that people tap into, but it's hard to kind of wrap your head around exactly what that looks like until you realize the number of expanding technologies that are happening all the time, right? So oftentimes these asks for expanding our understanding have to do with the fact that people are not necessarily using the core technology stack that you want them to in order to gain educational insights and training about everything, your products, your services, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that's changing is by extending our ability to tap into the world at large, we're able to do things like, for example, one customer has an extensive library of courses and content that are available via YouTube. Now, YouTube is not exactly what we would turn to as our kind of core delivery platform, right? But because of the extensibility paradigm there, we're able to tap into real-time data about who is actually coming in to view these important pieces. And for them, this is a critical part of the B2B experience because they're a manufacturer of hardware for computer-related technology. Look how cryptic I was. And there are lots of high-tech performative aspect kind of considerations, but in the end, the products they make the world a lot more fun, right? And so they want to leverage that kind of highly visible space to reach out to potential customers and also to potential partners in the B2B space to help them see the kind of why of why their products and services make a huge difference and a huge impact in the fun of the experience that their people are having, right? And so being able to tap these non-traditional spaces becomes a really important part of getting a rich kind of canvas, and it lets you spread your channel a little wider, and it also lets you be ready to spread your channel wider, right? Because we know kind of what omni-channel looks like today, right? And we know that clearly the addition of mobile devices and so forth and so on, it looks like that, right? But if somebody invents a wampus tomorrow and it's like the latest greatest way to send messaging, then we need an architecture that supports the wampus without having to like re-engineer the whole planet, if that makes any sense. So ultimately it's about that open architectural design accommodating the innovations as they're happening real time. And you may think, well, a wampus, that sounds ridiculous, but now think about it. If I just said an AI blank, right? In fact, the rate at which AI innovations, including core technologies as well as software innovations, are expanding is almost incomprehensible. So obviously, you need to have that kind of landscape available to you to be able to deliver the best solutions for everybody.
That was a great response. I love the wampus.
You can be sure the wampus will happen.
Yeah. We probably have time for one more question. One just came through the chat. What tactics have been used to shift ownership to sales leaders and foster stronger buy-in? With ever-changing initiatives and directions partnered with lean enablement teams, it's exceedingly hard to be agile enough to maintain the buy-in. Any suggestions to overcome this?
That is an awesome question, and we probably could go on about this for 20 minutes. So let's at least give it an effort, right? Because I think we have several left. I think there are several different ways that you can approach this in terms of shifting the accountability in that sense. First of all, I think that if you're looking at it from the perspective of I'm unit A and I'm trying to broaden my buy-in across all of my leadership, then I always encourage people to consider biting off a chunk that is digestible, so to speak. In other words, what I mean is, and I often, by the way, point to sales teams as the most likely to allow for this kind of venture. So if you think about it organizational wide, You don't want to necessarily tackle the entire organization and trying to rethread it all at once. And similarly, you may not want to try to tackle every single sales department or every single product alignment all at the same time. Instead, I would recommend that you try to focus on one or a few that you are certain that you can establish a partnership with that leader in that space because they either A, have a desperate need for you, or B, have strong reason to value what you have the capacity to do. Now, what's really critically important here is that that venture only works if everybody along the path is thinking from the get-go about what will this look like at the end point. What reporting or what critical metrics will we get that will actually cause us to improve our situation? You can do it two ways. You can do it, how can we improve what we think is already a glorious and fabulous system? Or you can do it the way that actually happens in the real world, which is you look at the stack of concerns. Well, concerns are opportunities, right? So if the concerns are we have this new product and it's not selling like we wish it were, then obviously there's considerations there along whether or not the product is a problem. But let's assume that there's nothing wrong with the product whatsoever. Now we have an opportunity to say, okay, what can we do to better train the personnel and to better understand the consumption of that training and to better understand the outcomes of that? What will be the goals that we'll set specifically? How will we align to those? And then you make sure that all of that reporting is in play as part of your design of the project and initiatives. If you start with that one bite, then you can bring that back to the table. You'll have all the reporting in place. You'll hopefully have great results to show that you used it to iteratively determine where improvements could be made, and you found a way to actually message more effectively to the right crowds, et cetera, all that kind of thing. Now, that will then put you in a great situation to sell that across other products and product teams. So I'd say, you either want the failing piece, or you want the piece where someone is mentally agile and thinking ahead to how can I be more successful, and bite those chunks off first, prove yourself on those spaces, and then try to push forward into the other domains. Tackling the whole world all at once is usually very problematic because each one of these initiatives will probably need to be its own thing. And then the last part of this is whenever you do this kind of initiative, report. Don't underestimate how important it is to blow your own horn. Have a celebration on the launch. Make people aware of what kind of new reporting data is available because of it. Make sure that you acknowledge and recognize every person who was involved in the project, and just let people know about the outcomes. The number one thing that fails in most of these kind of initiatives is that people don't realize that being humble is not helping the company, it's not helping your group, and it's not helping you. You have to share the insights. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but you have to share the insights. It's the only way to make sure that everyone grows.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. That was a great response. I think a lot of nuggets from your whole presentation. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time. I mean, we're just about out of time, so I'm going to let everybody know that we will be taking about a 15-minute break. And then we will have Catherine Alexandra joining us from Corporate Visions for their session, Let Your Buyers Be Your Guide, Using Feedback to Coach Sales Teams. So in just a minute, I will end this session, and then you can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. Again, thank you, Alan, for your time and this wonderful session, and we will see you all at the top of the hour.